I remember before we were even a village, that's because I grew up here when it was New Canada Township. I remember in 1957 when we incorporated into the village of Maplewood.
We had active farms in Maplewood when I started here. Oftentimes in the middle of the night, we'd have to go chase the cows off County Road D.
When I first started, the fair was a rough place. I mean, there were a lot of fights, a lot of problems up there at the time.
Nothing was electronic, everything was by hand.
We draft that by hand, and we had big drafting tables.
You don't see it changing day to day, but when you look back 10 years, 20 years, you go, wow, it's changed.
There's not much left to develop. We're basically remodeling now.
No longer a rural city, it's basically, a first-ring suburb.
Some of the areas in southern Maplewood were great party spots for kids at that time, and those places are gone. And are they is it for the better? Maybe. Maybe not for the kids that don't have a place to party anymore, but
The Ramsey County Correctional Facility down there was an actual working farm. They had cattle down there, they had crops, they raised their own crops.
I remember that our first police department was the chief and one half officer. Things have changed just a tad.
Back when I started, it was pretty quiet. By the time 11, 12 o'clock rolled around, there wasn't a whole lot going on within the city. And
right before I retired, we began the plans and the remodeling of the police department. And the biggest part of that project that I did not get to appreciate through 29 years in Maplewood was the garage. There were a lot of days where we had to brush snow off a lot of squad cars and keep them warm, and it was just a mess.
You can do more with it as far
You
as
make
more
changes
detail.
a lot quicker too.
Changes especially.
If you wanted to make a change, that could throw the project off conceivably a month. Everything had to be drafted by hand with ink and
Just getting the copy machines to copy it correctly off our Mylar type sepia style of drafting.
People have a thing in their heads now about how it's always been or how it is, and I like it this way and that type of thing. But how would we feel if the people who founded this city had not looked this far forward so we could have the quality of life we have now?
We're building more walks and trails. I think the environmental, like you're seeing more, ponding type things in parks, city-owned property, private rain gardens.
sidewalks is big.
Yeah. The environmental part of projects has grown immensely. When I first started here, the storm sewer was almost a residual thing.
I grew up right across the street from what became the Nature Center. All these things that we had grown to love as open and nature and all that were going to disappear. It happens to first-ring suburbs. And yet they had the foresight to set aside that site so that people had a place to go, to learn about nature, to feel it, to walk in it, to just simply enjoy it. That was foresight.
It's a top-notch organization, and some of us may not feel that way as we're going through our careers day after day, but when you compare to other communities, nearby communities that barely get their streets plowed, and people in Maplewood are upset if the streets aren't dry by noon after a snowfall.
Friday night, hot, 9 a.m. in my truck that had the heat. It was an old truck and they couldn't figure out how to get the heat off on it, so it always ran. And I mean, our equipment's way better than it used to be, believe me. But I remember I was doing note work and it was 5:30 on Friday, everybody was anxious to go home, and I hear this boom and I thought somebody ran into me, and here's this lady with a broom and she had hit the, I look back and then I was scared to death the first time she did that, but I was laughing. A week later, she was my best friend, but you laugh at things like that now.